Okay, assalamu alaikum. Hope you're all well, and good to be back on and to see everybody this week. Let's give a quick salam to see who's on our comment section. Kirito again. Salam, you have a live stream during my job hours. Come on. All right, sorry about that, but these are basically times I can do this. Usually we do it Saturday evenings for me, but I decided to do it today just to have a bit more time. Assalamu alaikum. Ibn Nuh, Dhul Qarnayn is not the historic Alexander the Great. Watching David Ewing Jr. and Dhul Qarnayn has been hidden from history as Attila the Hun. All right, okay. I've never heard that one before. But yes, this is what I'm going to be talking about basically. Dhul Qarnayn as myth, though I am pretty convinced it's in the end goes back to Alexander the Great, but I've never heard this one. So maybe I'll put a link to that or something in the chat or in the comments later when this video is up, because that would be interesting. It's Attila the Hun. No? Never heard that before, but okay, cool. Salam, Farhana. What else do we have? Ayman, salam, it's good to see you. Mahbub, assalamu alaikum. Mubarak, yes, belated Mubarak to everybody. Assalamu alaikum, Hector, always good to see you. And we have perfect da'wah with us as well. Assalamu alaikum. All right, okay, so I was going to do this earlier. By the way, I hope the volume is better this time because somebody last time said that the sound was very low. So I tried to increase it. Sounds loud to me, but anyway. I'm in the wrong slide on this. There we go. Right, so this is going to be a pretty long presentation. But I'll try to get through with it as best I can. No, what's that? Stop. Okay. Name is Abdul Hamid. Yes. Abdul Hamid or Abdul Hamid. I always mix it up. All right. Okay. So yes, what we're going to be talking about is Dhul Qarnayn in the Qur'an. Now these are not really things which I focus on. There's more important things, and how people seem to make this a very big issue and argue about it quite a bit. But just, with some perspective, it's not that important, right? I mean, it's like very low among the priorities that we should have with regards to trying to, contemplate and understand the Quran, but it's there. I mean, something which is prevalent. People like to talk about it, and basically, the background for me was somebody asked me actually to look into this idea that Dhul Qarnayn in the Quran is like a mythical version of Alexander the Great, right? Mythical version. For me, generally the issue, was closed a long time ago of who Dhul Qarnayn is. That it was, of course, just Alexander the Great. It's well known. I think it's very well studied. The story in the Quran, the way the Quran has it, its parts are very similar to the Greek Alexander Romance versions or renditions, because there's more than one. It's a collection. The first one that was made sort of in Greek, the Greek Alexander Romances, was written, and then it was expanded on, added to, that sort of thing. And even earlier, of course, and more importantly, there's Josephus, who described the journeys of Alexander the Great, or what he did, very similar, almost exactly like it is in the Quran. So, I mean, for me, it was just it's a simple case. But of course, the problem was that later on, and the thing about it, the early Muslims all recognized this must be Alexander the Great. So the early Mufassirin and early scholars all unanimously pretty much. Yes, there were some, like the way all scholars like to do, they start talking about all the different opinions. Oh, there's an opinion it's a king of Himyar, opinion of this, an opinion of that. But generally, everybody pretty much accepted that it was Alexander the Great. But the problem was, of course, that in recent times, a lot of work that's been done on Alexander the Great, puts him forward as a pagan, or as somebody immoral, as a homosexual in some cases, all of these things. And so because of that, Muslims started to retreat and say it can't be that Dhul Qarnayn can't be Alexander the Great, and this is how the historical Alexander the Great was. Okay, so these are the contentions that were brought up, and so they went off. Muslims started saying Cyrus the Great mostly, and now I hear this this new one of the Hun, Attila, or whatever his name, the Hun. Ultimately, though, of course, just history. History is a collection of different people's stories. Okay, so the accepted version of history is it's constantly being amended, tweaked in either big or small ways. And in the end, it will come down to his story, as in the history that we put together, versus your faith in his story and God's story that he's putting forward. Okay, it's just like, for me, it's just like the crucifixion. Okay, the historical weight is all on that Jesus, that Isa was crucified. I mean, that's pretty much as I think it's Bart Ehrman or others say, the most known fact about Isa's life is how he died, right? That he died by crucifixion. Okay, so that's the history. Okay, but I reject it just because out of faith that history can be wrong, right? What can seem like a fact of history may not always be true, right? We don't always have the right history. Okay, which is why ultimately it gets amended. Right, people 100 years ago might have thought that they have the correct history. New information comes out and it gets amended, etc. Right, and history mostly, especially when it comes to ancient history like this, they deal in probabilities. Okay, what probably happened, what probably didn't happen. Right, so historians say there's a very high probability that Alexander the Great never went anywhere near the Caucasus Mountains, in around present-day Georgia to build the Caspian Gates or the gates of Alexandria, the Iron Gates. He said there's a high probability, he never did that at all. But it's probability, right? We're talking about probabilities, right? And one thing to note about history when you talk about in these kind of ways, what most likely happened. If you always choose the most likely, the most probable, it means you will, if you always just choose the most likely probable outcome, and you will always be wrong in some of the minorities, okay? Because just by statistics, right? If you've got 100 different situations, in each situation you've got 80% chance of one thing happening versus the other, and you keep on choosing the most probable 80%. Fine, you'll be right most of the time, but you'll also be wrong a minority of the time. Right? Choosing the most probable history will not give you always the true history. Right, so that's just something on the side thing. But anyway, let's talk about this. So, like I said, somebody asked me to look into this, and how I delayed. I didn't look into it for a very long time, over 6 months or something. And the person was very patient with me, and just every once in a while reminded me. Eventually, I did look into it, but pretty briefly as well. I mean, I didn't do much reading into it. Mostly, I just saw some of the interviews with this fellow here, Tommaso Tessai, who's an Italian historian who looks into late antiquity and other things. But anyway, he got interested in Dhul Qarnayn, and so he started looking into it. Who is this Dhul Qarnayn? And what he says is basically that the Syriac text, which is called the Victory or the Triumph, Nisana. I think that's how you pronounce it, Nisana of Alexandria, the Nisana, which is called generally the Syriac Alexander legend, okay, and which predates the Greek collection of Alexandrian romance stories, that is the origin of the Qur'anic Dhul Qarnayn. That is the origin of the Qur'anic Dhul Qarnayn. Now, both the Sirach Nisana, the legend, and the Greek romance stories were likely drawing on earlier material. Okay, and even the Nisana could have been drawing on earlier versions of the romance stories as well. Okay, before they were, compiled by the Greeks. Even though later it is the romance stories which draw from the Nisana. Right? They draw on Nisana, for example, in the story of the Iron Gates. Okay. So you have this, okay? So the timeline is this: you've got early material stories by Alexander the Great, okay? Then you have the Nisana, okay, which has a certain version we'll talk about in a minute, and then you have the Greek Alexander romances, which I think he said they were put together around the 3rd, 4th centuries, okay, and which then later on get expanded and added to, okay. So now Dhul Qarnayn is a mythical Alexander. Mythical how? Well, the idea is that the Nisana is not trying to describe history, okay? But it is a political tool or narrative to address the situation at the time of its composition by portraying Alexander as a Christian divine agent or tool or prophet who did God's work and defeated the Persians, and defeated Persia, and who would have welcomed the Messiah in Jerusalem. He would have put his, established his seat in Jerusalem, and he would have welcomed the Messiah there. And in the same way that Alexander was like that, the current, at the time when the Nisana was written, the current Christian empire would likewise be God's tool and would defeat the Persians once more. So that's the idea, okay? So to push this political agenda, the author of the Nisana uses previous traditions of Alexander the Great, okay, including those which are not historical, like the building of the Iron Gate. I put not in quotation marks because, again, we're talking about ancient history, okay? So he uses these things to actually construct this version of the Syriac Christian Alexandria legend. Okay, so if the Quran is taking from the Nisana, okay, and the Nisana is not written to be historical but mythical, really, then the Quran too is not portraying a historical Alexandria but a mythical one. Okay, even if it is one which people came to believe as history. So at the time, people maybe believe this is history, right? That once the Nisana was written and it was propagated and the story taken up, and eventually this came to be taken as actual history. Okay, so e.g. Dhul Qarnayn is Alexander the Great, whom people believed is the version basically of Alexander the Great, a mythical version of Alexander the Great that people believed, and he built the Iron Gates even though the real Alexander the Great did not. That's the idea. Okay, that's the idea. So what does that mean for the Quran? Okay, so accepting for argument's sake at least that Dhul Qarnayn is certainly Alexander the Great, as seems to be the overwhelming evidence. You can either insist that the Quranic narrative is the correct history, and so the current academic history is more the myth, or the reverse. Okay, you can give preference to what the academia sees as the most probable biography of Alexandria, and see the Quran narrative as mythical. Okay, so what does that mean? And what does that mean for the Quran? Let's consider point 2. Okay, let's just say the idea behind the stream is for me to give an idea. Let's say that this is true, that the historical Alexander the Great is not like that, but Dhul Qarnayn in the Quran is basically modeled definitely after Alexander the Great, but in a mythical sense. Can that be just justified, basically? Okay, can Dhul Qarnayn in Surah 18 be read as a mythical story rather than history? I thought, look into it. I thought, there is a way to look at it this way. I think there are a number of reasons where you can take this approach of it. Okay, so the first reason is how the story is introduced. Okay, so looking back at the opening, it is introduced in a way which is unique from any other story in the Quran. Okay, so this is a story which is given upon request. I.e., it isn't a story that God chose to narrate. Okay, there's no other story which starts like that. يسألونك عن Musa, يسألونك عن I don't know, Ibrahim, يسألونك عن, there's no story, there's nothing like that. Okay, you have questions in the Quran where they say يسألونك عن الأهلة, يسألونك عن, etc. They ask you, Muhammad, about this, about different things. But in terms of a story, and all the stories that we have in the Quran, this is the only one which is given upon request, or which is introduced in that kind of way. يسألونك عن ذُو القرنين. They ask you, Muhammad, about ذُو القرنين. Okay, so that's the first point. Okay, that it's by request. Second point, it can be read to mean that what is being recounted here is one version of Dhul Qarnayn story. Okay, what is being recounted is one of the dhikrs by the way the verses can be translated. So yes, they ask you about Dhul Qarnayn. Say, I will read or recite or relate to you of him a dhikr, a dhikr. Okay, one of the dhikrs which are available. Okay, one of the dhikrs which are in circulation. Okay, and I was actually surprised that some of them, when I checked the translations for putting up these slides, I was actually surprised that some of the translations already have it rendered like that. Okay, but if you put it literally, okay, يسألونك, they ask you عن ذي القرنين, about ذي القرنين, say قل سأتلو عليكم, I will recite or read or read to you منه, of him, a dhikr, dhikran. Okay, you can actually read it literally like that, the verse. Okay, dhikr here would be a current remembrance or something remembered about him, something, a story which is related, told about him. Okay, and you have this in all the other translations as well. يسألونك عن ذي القرنين قل سأتلو عليكم منه ذكرا. So Sahih International has it, and they ask you, O Muhammad, about Dhul Qarnayn, say, I will recite to you about him a report, one report, possibly out of many. Okay, one report out of many, one story out of many. All right, not necessarily the correct one or the historical one. Okay, and why would it be just why wouldn't it be? Well, because the questioners are asking, tell us about Dhul Qarnayn. And we'll come to this later, but if it's being put forward as a test, as some of the narrations say, then the version you want to give is a version which they will be able to affirm. But anyway, we'll come to that. Arbery has it. They will question thee concerning Dhul Qarnayn. Say, I will recite to you a mention of him. Okay, a mention. The other one here, Bikthal has it. They will ask thee of Dhul Qarnayn, say, I shall recite unto you a remembrance of him. Okay, something remembered about him. Okay, and they, or a story about him. You could even say, الذكر, يتذاكرون, right? They relate to each other stories, and they ask you about Dhul Qarnayn. Say, I will recite to you about him a remembrance. Again, that's corpus. And I thought I'd put in the alternative, which is I chose Yusuf Ali here because that was at hand, which you can read it as they ask thee about Dhul Qarnayn, say, I'll rehearse to you something of his story. So part of his story, not the full story, something of his story, right? So this verse can be read or understood in both ways. Either what is going to be related is just part of his story, which is evidently true. Okay, it's only part of the story. It's not going to be his full life account. Or can be actually read that we are going to recite or rehearse to you a one of the reports or one of the remembrance of him. Okay, قل سأتلو عليكم منه ذكرا. Okay, and it's just very unique, this introduction to a story in the Quran. We don't have it put in that kind of way anywhere else. Secondly, okay, the mythical title rather than a name. Right, so I'm just putting points that why you could potentially read Dhul Qarnayn as a mythical version of Alexander the Great. So here we have this the title, right? So since he is so clearly Alexander the Great, or taking that as an assumption, just for argument's sake, why not just give him his name? Why not just say يسألونك عن Alexander, right? Why give him this title? Why this title or this image of a two-horned one? Well, you could say, I'd say that it fits in more with a mythical figure in the story, right? Literally a person with two horns. Okay, this isn't a real person. This is like a fictional, mythical character, okay, with two actual horns coming out of his head, right? Like the, like all of these demigods and stuff that they have in, in Greek legends and stuff like that. Okay. Third reason, the background narration. So this question, according to the narration, was put forward as a test upon the recommendation of Quraysh's Jewish allies, right? So the narrations are unfortunately, of course, confused and modeled as to whether they introduced the title of Dhul Qarnayn or even Ashab al-Kahf, the companions of the Kahf, or whether the Quran is the first to introduce that title. So does this title of Dhul Qarnayn predate the Quran or not? Right, actual title. Okay, yes, we can say, okay, Alexander the Great was known for having two horns on his helmet, on the coins, etc. All of these things, but was he ever known pre-Quran as he of two horns or the two-horned one or anything like that? I don't know. All right, I don't know. So it's not clear, but the narrations themselves are not clear whether this title of Dhul Qarnayn is introduced in the question itself. So literally, يسألونك عن ذي القرنين. They actually asked the Prophet, hey, tell us about Dhul Qarnayn. Did they actually say those words? Tell us about him, or did they just ask in a general way? Okay, and it's the Quran in replying that gives him this title of Dhul Qarnayn. It's not clear. But anyway, so you have this the narration, which is basically the Jews replied. When the Quraysh allies asked them, tell us something. How can we know if this man is really a prophet or not? They said to him, ask him, as'al rajul, ask the man Muhammad about three things. Okay, three things. So if he tells you of them, then the man is a messenger. Mursal, he's been sent. وإن لم يفعل فالرجل متقول. And if he doesn't, then the man is just making things up. Okay. وقد ظل زمان نبي فاسألوه عن طواف قد بلغ المشرق والمغرب. Okay, so they said, we know that the Prophet is Jew, but anyway, ask him, okay, about a traveler, a person who traveled far. Okay, here it's just mentioned as traveler, طواف. Okay, قد بلغ المشرق والمغرب, who had reached the east and the west. Okay, قد كان له خبر ونبأ وقصص. And this is the part which I wanted to highlight from this narration. Okay, it says a traveler who reached the east and the west. There was of him news, khabar and naba, okay, and stories. Okay, stories. Many different stories, perhaps conflicting stories. Mythical stories and etc. Okay, so stories about him. Okay, and then this is, of course, continues with Alu an Ruh and ask him about the Ruh. And if he were to tell you about him, about the Ruh, فإنه كذاب, he's a liar because he shouldn't know. And if he says he doesn't know, then it's as he says. And also ask him about Ashab al-Kahf, right? The companions of the cave. So here the companions of the cave are given their title, which is in the Quran. Okay, then it says فإن عجز عنها فهو متقول. If he can't answer these, then he's making things up. Okay, in another version, the Jews got together and they said to Quraysh, ask Muhammad three things. If he tells you of two of them and doesn't tell you of the third, then he's truly a prophet. Okay, so of course if he doesn't tell you about the spirit, the Ruh. Okay, then said Saluhu an fityatun madaw fi az-zaman. Okay, ask him about a group of young men, young people from times of old, which is of course Ashab al-Kahf. So here they're not given. وعن رجل بلغ مشارق الأرض ومغاربها, and about a man who reached the east and the west of the earth, and ask him about the Ruh. One more version I'm putting here. أسألوه عن ثلاثة. They said ask him about three. So if he tells you about two of them, and he doesn't tell you about the third, then you should know that he's a prophet and you should follow him. Ask him about Ashab al-Kahf. Okay, again, وَذَكَرُوا لَهُمْ قِصَّتَهُم, and then they mentioned to Quraysh their story. Okay, because Quraysh didn't know. Okay, and ask him about Dhul Qarnayn. So in this version, we actually have in the narration that they said, asking about Dhul Qarnayn, and it mentions here that he wasn't just a traveler. فَإِنَّهُ كَانَ مَلِكًا for he was a king. وَكَانَ مِنْ أَمْرِهِ كَذَا وَكَذَا, and of his affair was such and such, such and such. So they apparently told Quraysh about him, okay? And then asking him about the ruh, etc. Okay? The point is that if this was, if we take these narrations at face value, if this was a test, then the answer had to conform to the story as it was believed by the questioner. Okay, so the Quran could not give what we now think as the historical Alexander. It had to give what was considered the historical Alexander by the questioner, which to us now might be a myth, might be mythical, right? Might not be the real historical Alexander the Great. Okay, so there's a questioner that had to be satisfied. Okay, the question is the one who had to be satisfied by the answer, not us 1,400 years later. And that's mainly a thing I always try to highlight when people discuss Dhul Qarnayn. Okay, remember that this was people then who were asking. Okay, يسألونك عن ذي القرنين. They ask you about Dhul Qarnayn, and they were given the answer, and seemingly they as far as we know, it satisfied them. Okay, it's not supposed to it wasn't for us. We didn't ask this. Okay, we didn't ask it. So that's the important point. It was supposed to satisfy the people then. Okay, so how another point is how the companions of the cave are introduced. So if you take the narration into account again, it is noteworthy contrast that the story of Ashab al-Kahf is not introduced in the same way, right? It isn't. They ask you about Ashab al-Kahf. Okay, I will relate to you something of a mention of them. It doesn't say that. Okay, that's not how it's introduced. Even though apparently the background is the same question, same the three questions given in one go. Okay, rather it seems to be introduced as sacred history, as real history. Okay, that happened. A real place is mentioned, which is Al-Raqim, which is now known to be Petra, if I remember correctly. That's mentioned. Okay, so the verse introduces like this: "Am hasibta anna ashab al-kahfi wal-raqim kanu min ayatina ajaba." Or have you thought that the companions of the cave and the inscription, which is Al-Raqim, I don't know why, it's just being translated, but Al-Raqim is actually a place. I think it's a proper name. Were among our signs we wonder. Okay, and then later on, a few verses later, it says, "Nahnu naqussu alayka naba'ahum bil-haqq." Okay, it is we who relate to you, O Muhammad, their story in truth. Okay, this is the truth of it. Okay, so it's not, it's a very different introduction to how it is with Dhul Qarnayn, which is, say I will relate to you something, a dhikr, a mention of him. Okay, saying here, no, we will relate to you. نحن نقص عليكم نبأهم بالحق. We will relate to you their story in truth. Okay, إنهم فتية آمنوا بربهم وزدناهم هدى. Indeed, they were youths who believed in their Lord, and we increased them in guidance. Okay, other thing I'd like to note, okay, relevance. Okay, the story of Ashab al-Kahf, and typoed over here, Ashab al-Kahf, is more like a typical Quranic story. It has relevance to the struggle of faith and persecution that was happening in Mecca. On the other hand, the Dhul Qarnayn story is likely the most irrelevant, to put it that way, irrelevant story in the Quran. In terms of it's not very relevant to us now or later, and makes sense. It wasn't a story again that was chosen by God to narrate. It was a request. It was an what's called a reply to a request. They asked for the story, and the Quran gave it. Okay, if they hadn't asked, would the Quran have narrated this story to us? I don't think so. Okay, I don't think so. All right, so it was purely by request. Okay, which really means very little to us, though, the story. Okay, it is there not purely by God's choice, but upon request. This can be an answer to those who ask, why would God relate the story of an infidel or pagan or unrighteous person like Alexander the Great? Well, God didn't relate it just like that. It was asked, and the Prophet was asked about it, and God responded to it. Okay, so it was upon request. And besides which, the likely question is the Jews do not see him as an unrighteous person, right? So the Jews themselves, the origins of the story, they don't see him that way. They don't see him as as an unrighteous person. They actually see him as one of the righteous Gentiles, as far as we know. Okay, some other issues I just thought I'd put in here. That God spoke to Dhul Qarnayn. So people say, okay, then how, God spoke to Dhul Qarnayn, therefore he's righteous or received wahi, and therefore he cannot be Alexander the Great because Alexander the Great was not like that. That doesn't fit it. Okay, and that's based upon this part of the verse where it says حتى إذا بلغ مغرب الشمس وجدها تغرب في عين حمئة وجد عندها قوما قلنا, we said, يا ذا القرنين إما أن تعذب وإما تتخذ فيهم حسنا. Allah said, when God said, O Dhul Qarnayn, either you punish them or else adopt among them a way of goodness. So with this, I mean, I've never seen it that way at all. I've never seen, even before looking into the story, or I've always just, whenever I've read this verse, it has never seemed to me that this is God actually speaking to him. Okay, it's not a wahi to him. I've always read it and seen this verse as God speaking as basically like the voice of the narrator. Now, I was scratching my head trying to think of a good example of that from a movie or something, but it's like the voiceovers that you have on some stories, where something is happening and then you have like a narrator voice. So protagonist X, what will you do now? Right? The narrator isn't actually speaking to the protagonist, right? It's just sort of like it's part of rhetoric. Okay, it's part of the rhetoric of relating a story. And that's how I've always seen that. I don't see this as being God actually speaking directly to Dhul Qarnayn and Dhul Qarnayn hearing him. Okay, that isn't how it is, right? But let's say, for argument's sake, that it was wahi. Receiving wahi is something which needs to be investigated. It isn't an integral part of righteousness or to being a prophet. It's not that if you receive wahi, you're a prophet, or that if you receive wahi, you're righteous. Okay? And Dhul Qarnayn is not being put forward as a particularly moral or immoral person with respect to things which are similar to Alexander the Great. I mean, Alexander did a lot of good things as well. Okay? And like I said, the story of part of the story, even if you discount the mythical parts, part of the stories which are known about Alexander the Great does have him, behaving as a just ruler. Okay. Other thing, Jesus' disciples, they got wahi in the Quran. It's mentioned, إذ أوحيت للحواريين أن آمنوا بي وبرسولي. When I gave wahi to the disciples that you should believe in me and in my messenger, right? That wasn't a wahi that they sort of like, it wasn't God speaking to them and they knew that God was speaking to them. It wasn't that kind of wahi. Okay, and in any case, they were not prophets. And then, and they even after that, after the professed faith, they even asked Isa for the Ma'idah, to send down a table from the heavens filled with food to eat from it, etc. And they asked this even after they were warned, اتقوا الله إن كنتم مؤمنين, don't ask for this if you're really people of Iman, okay? Don't ask for something like this, okay? But then they pushed on and asked for it, okay? So this again showing that isn't the case that somebody who receives wahi, okay, is necessarily going to be a righteous person always. And there's even an indication, implication in the verses that one of them or some of them might have even gone into kufr even after the Ma'idah, right? Which is why that threat is there, okay? قال الله إني منزلها عليكم. Allah said that I'm going to send it down upon you. So if any of you go into kufr after this, and I will punish them a punishment that I don't punish anybody else in the world, okay? The asbat, when the Quran mentions, that about wahi given to the asbat, who are asbat, but I'm not sure, but we know these are not prophets, okay? They're not a prophet, but they did receive, quote unquote, wahi, okay? So apparently Dhul Qarnayn isn't mentioned with explicit praise, nor is he mentioned anywhere else in the Quran among the prophets or those whom God has blessed, right? It's just part of the story is being narrated, okay? And some good parts, of course, right? Some good parts. Other thing, okay, Alexander was a pagan. So let's say he was a pagan. All right, what does that mean? I mean, I don't know if many of you saw the community post I put. I don't know how long ago it was now, but there's this inscriptional evidence. And the evidence of the inscriptions in Arabia now seem to show that there was a wide monotheistic revolution in Arabia pre-Islam. Pre-Islam. Okay, so before Islam, the Prophet, there was already a wide, all over Arabia, the inscriptions turned to just being dedicated to Allah only. Okay, but yet the Quran calls the mushrikeen. Okay, and in any case, okay, being a pagan, it doesn't mean that you never believe in God or never spoke of God. Okay, Alexander the Great certainly did, and there could be there could be little difference in terms of his paganism between him and the mushrikeen at the time of the Prophet. Okay, they also called upon Allah. They also believed in Allah. They knew that He was Rabbul Alameen, etc. Okay, the mushrikeen in the Quran all believe in God and call Him Rabb of the worlds and would make dua to Him. Right, and you have many of such verses. And if you ask them who is the Rabb of the seven heavens and earth, they will reply Allah. If you ask them who is the Rabb of the Arsh, they will reply Allah. Okay, there are numerous verses like that. So the paganism issue isn't a huge one either. All right, and this leads me just to speak about one other thing, sort of like branching off from this in a different sort of a overview of how academia looks at some of these stories. I think so. If you look back in the narration, it says, فَإِنْ عَجَزَ عَنْهَا, the Jew said, فَإِنْ عَجَزَ عَنْهَا فَهُوَ مُتَقَوِّلٌ. If he isn't able, if the Prophet isn't able to answer these questions, okay, then he is making it up. If he isn't able to tell you about Ashab al-Kahf, if he isn't able to tell you about Dhul Qarnayn, he's making things up. Okay, why? Why is that there? Because they expect him not to know. They expect him not to know because they know and they knew this information, this story was not current among the Arabs. Okay, and it certainly didn't seem to be current among Quraysh. Right? They didn't know it. And this is one of my criticism against the modern sort of Quranic studies. Sometimes they put it forward that if a story was known, by which they mean it's found, basically written somewhere, okay, at the time of the Prophet or a little bit before or after, or just generally in the whole region, somewhere in the Middle East, right? Then it must have been known to the Arabs, and it must have been known in Hijaz, and it must have been known to Quraysh, and it must have been known to the Prophet Muhammad, right? Though that conclusion is of course understandable in secular terms. How could a story which is, in some, I don't know, Syriac text or Greek text or whatever it is, and then it's found to have a similar story in the Quran, right? It must have been, in secular terms, the Quran must have gotten it from somewhere, okay? But they make very little to no attempt to show a pathway. There's no pathway that's shown from how these stories get from a completely different region, completely different language, all the way to Hijaz and to Quraysh and to the Prophet, right? They just assume that if a story is discovered, written down somewhere from the time or near about the time or in the region, in another language even, right? Then it was part of what they call the popular milieu, right? The intellectual milieu or just the milieu, that these stories were known. There's no evidence for this. There's no evidence that the common person or the average person, or even the generally learned person, okay, was aware of such stories. Okay, I don't see that at all. Okay, it isn't the way things like this worked. Okay, people did not share their sacred religious stories across cultures to other peoples. They just didn't, right? You wouldn't, the Jews didn't sit down and narrate their stories to the Arabs, even though we're talking about here Arabized Jews even, right? They didn't have these like open forums. There were no exchanging of books or community libraries. People didn't learn from each other like that. It wasn't transmitted like this. Okay, the books and the scriptures and things that were written down, sacred scriptures and stories, they were under lock and key. Okay, they were in private libraries of the learned people. They kept them. They weren't just out and about. Okay, so this approach of modern scholarship that just because evidence of something was found among the learned of a community means it is part of the intellectual milieu of the surrounding people, I think it's very problematic, right? And there's evidence for this in the Quran, for this view. Okay, there's evidence in the Quran for this view. There's no more biblical story. If you're going to talk about a biblical story, there's nothing more biblical than Noah's Ark, right? Noah's Ark is the Old Testament story. Okay, yet the Quran says that neither the Prophet nor his people knew of it. Okay, it says at the end of that story being told in Surah Hud, تِلْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ نُوحِيهَا إِلَيْكَ Okay, مَا كُنْتَ تَعْلَمُهَا أَنْتَ وَلَا قَوْمُكَ Okay, that is from the news of the unseen which we reveal to you, O Muhammad. You knew it not, you didn't know it, neither you nor your people. Okay, it's emphatic negation. This could have been something that Quraysh would have said, what are you talking about? We know the story of Noah's Ark. Okay, but they didn't, okay, because it looks like they didn't know it. Okay, and if you look at the stories that they did have, they had their own stories. The Arabs had their own stories and their own poetry and their own epics of revenge and this, and they didn't have those. Okay, just like the people in Syriac speaking peoples, or in northern Syria, they didn't have the stories of these Arabs. Okay, stories were not moved around that much. Okay, so this to me is a very goes in stark opposition to all of this idea, because the most biblical story, the Quran is saying that the people of Mecca, the people of Mecca didn't know it, right? The people of Mecca didn't know it, and you could say the whole the Arabs of Hijaz, if you take your people as wider. Okay, so before this revelation, and it's described as news of the unseen. Okay, so if there was no intellectual milieu. Okay, if there was an intellectual milieu, that would not be the case. Okay, if Nuh's news was unknown, why do we assume that the news of Alexander the Great or the Iron Gate or the Juj and Majuj was known? And I actually put a series of tweets about this a while ago. Let me just read a bit from that. Well, let me actually share the screen for it. Okay. So yeah, it wasn't a long discussion. I forget what it's about. I think it was about a weird interpretation of Ibn Ashur for, I don't know what it is. The person deleted the tweets eventually, because I don't know. Anyway, they deleted the tweets. So anyway, I wrote here, this, however, is something to discuss. You're saying these narrations reflect myths present in the Quranic society influenced by Jews and Christians. And in this reply, so he put something again which was deleted. So I say here, now slow down and hear me out. These things are not a given, and in my humble opinion are very overblown. So let me just read it out. There simply was no intellectual milieu back then. There was not intellectual or intellectual cross communication between cultures at all. Okay, the intellectuals and the tradition bearers of one tradition were not telling their stories to outsiders, and certainly the majority of the Arabs were very uninterested in the minority Christian and Jews among them, who themselves were very Arabized. Okay, the people in the pre-modern world just didn't share their religious and sacred stories with others in that way. Okay, there was no intellectual milieu, there was public. Again, just look at even the modern world. Lots of major US cities have had huge Chinatowns for generations. Yet do the people in New York know much about the Chinese religion stories? No, okay? This is even when compulsory education and going to school together. even with this being put into place, people just don't know. There isn't this kind of thing. People don't sit down together and start, telling all of these stories in that kind of way. So I grew up in London, but know nothing about Krishna, okay, other than the name, which is true. I don't know who or what Krishna is or any of the stories about it or nothing. I know nothing about Krishna, right? Despite I've had Hindu friends, and in the school there were a lot of Hindus, and we actually studied this a little bit, okay? In uni, I remember this is a funny mini story. In uni, me and a friend once wanted to pray in a certain building. Okay, the receptionist very kindly showed us a room and told us, by the way, east is that way, I think. So we actually went in, we wanted to pray. He said, yes, look, I'll open up this back room for you, can pray. He was very nice, very, very, very decent person. And, on the way out, he was like, oh, by the way, east is that way. He's pointing to us east because he thinks we pray towards the east. Okay, that was just 20 years ago. Okay, he thought he was being helpful. Okay, he didn't know that Muslims pray to Mecca. Okay, if he had been the person who had to write down now about Muslims, he would have written down, Muslims pray to the east, and this would later, 500 years be taken as historical, right? Somebody contemporary told us what Muslims did. Okay, but he's wrong. Okay, you even have in Hollywood movies until very recently were depicting Muslims praying as a man was standing at the top of the minaret. Okay, calling Allahu Akbar. So anybody seen these old movies where you have the Hollywood are portraying Muslims praying in Turkey or something, right? And you've basically just got somebody in the minaret at the top saying Allahu Akbar, and people on the street just doing sujood. That's it. And then that's how they saw. That's how they envisioned Muslims praying. This was very recent. Okay, they were conflating the adhan with this, these weird scenes, this weird salah. The point is that now, let alone low population dispersed Arabia 1,400 years ago, people don't naturally have an intellectual milieu that surrounds them with information about the sacred rites and stories of others who they are in close proximity with. Okay, there's a barrier of culture, there's a barrier of religion where they don't do that. Okay, they don't do that, right? These aren't shared. Okay, nor were there public written works or writings that were shared between cultures. The sacred books were few and guarded. So this approach of modern scholarship, that just because evidence of something was found among the learned of a community means that it was part of the intellectual milieu of the surrounding people, I think that's very problematic. And here I wrote exactly the same thing. And there's evidence for this in the Qur'an. The most biblical story is Nuh, right? And yet the Qur'an confirms that it's not known to the Arabs. Okay, it just wasn't known to, at least to the Prophet's people. Okay, and that's basically it. Okay, stop sharing that. I'll bring back the other one, and we're done. How long was that? Wow, almost 48 minutes. I warned you it would be long. What do I still have with me? 15 people. Assalamu alaikum. So I don't have anybody backstage, so I'll just have a look quickly at the comments. If anybody would like to come on, of course, you're more than welcome. Let me bring back the presentation. All right. Okay, let's scroll back up. Yeah, so Perfect Hour says it is not Alexander the Great because he was a brutal murderer and a pagan. See, the same idea. See, I think this is a big misconception that the Quran is portraying him as this great righteous person, that he was a person who received wahi, like that he was like a prophet. He wasn't. Okay, three incidents are mentioned with him, and that's it. All right, he's not praised as some righteous person. He's just mentioned as a king whom God gave a lot. All right. So again, it's this back thing where people rejecting that it's Alexander the Great, just because of, I think, misconceptions about it, about his supposed righteousness or what he believed. It's just a story being told. What else do you say here? Sorry. It's talking about Cyrus, right? It's actually spelled Cyrus. Sirius is, I think that's the star, isn't it? Was a fair king and a believer, etc., etc. And the thing about Cyrus the Great is, I don't think he has anything to do with the tribes of Gog and Magog. These are known people. Gog and Magog were known actual people. They're not some mythical people. So he was a prophet of God, blah, 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 etc. Yeah, Cyrus wrote the first human right. Again, look, this has got nothing to do with the story of Dhul Qarnayn, right? That he was a muwahhid or not. The Quran doesn't make clear that he was a muwahhid or not. And besides which, Alexander the Great, as far as I know, he did profess his belief in the God of the Jews, the God of Israel, when he went to the temple. He did profess his belief in that. My assessment, I'll bring you on in a minute. I've got two people backstage. KOH, I don't know how to pronounce that. And Aslam, I'll bring you on soon. Just want to go through all of that, through all of these quickly. Your assessment is that he was Cyrus the Great. Yeah. And it's become very common now to say it was Cyrus the Great. Cyrus accepted that this universe has a sustainer. Yeah. Again, I don't see that's relevant. The mushrikeen of Mecca did the same, right? If you ask them who is رب السماوات السبع ورب العرش العظيم ليقولون الله. Okay, I don't see any of these being much different from Alexander the Great in terms of religion, right? This again goes back to the difference between paganism and shirk and mushrikeen, these kind of things. There's a mountain in Qafaz region named Qur'anic. Yeah, I don't know anything about that, to be honest. Yeah, again, he was a monotheist pagan. Again, he was as much a Dhul Qarnayn is not being shown as a monotheist, even if we say that. And of course, Alexander the Great was a student of Aristotle, right? And Aristotle was a muwahhid. And don't forget that just because, you could say even this, that because rulers will generally, the religion of their people will be portrayed onto the ruler, right? So, for example, the Prophet's grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, he seemed almost certainly to have been a muwahhid. Okay, I certainly believe he was, right? He was a person who worshipped, he believed in Allah only. He didn't worship or the bow to the idols or stuff like that. But his people would narrate that he was a mushrik. He was one of them, right? So they would say to Abu Talib, are you going to leave the religion of Abdul Muttalib, right? So when they spoke to him about, when they tried to convince him not to become a Muslim. That's our verse. Yeah, the story which is mentioned in the Quran is pretty much exactly how Josephus narrates it for Alexander the Great. But again, I don't want to make this into a big issue. To me, it's one of the least most important arguments that people have. And it being Cyrus or Alexander the Great doesn't really matter for the Quran's purpose in it. Exactly location, I confess. Don't spend much time on this. Exact location where the sun goes down, I'm not sure what that means, to be honest. But good to see you as well, Adriana. Can you make a stream? I'm talking about the New Age religions. It seems they are not new at all. I think that the religion of Abraham's father is back. I don't know much about them, to be honest, but so if I do have some thoughts about it, why not? Dhul Qarnayn, one of the two crowns. Okay, Alexander is the only one in history who crowned twice by two different nations in different places. Okay, that's another one. It's certainly not about Alexander the Great. Correctly as a title, and his two horns. There's another meaning for Qarnayn. And all one day people said that's he of the 2 centuries, right? Yeah, I mean, so this question, I only hear that Alexander the Great was a sun worshipper. I don't understand why the Quran, Allah tells a story. It's a request. Okay, so just remember that it's a request. It's not something which God chose to speak about, right? It was a question put forward, and seemingly as a test, if we take the narrations to go with it, and so it was a response. Okay, they asked for it, and the Quran replied to it. So need to remember that. All right, I think that questions are drying up, or at least I'll come back to them. Let me put on some of the people who have been waiting for us. KOH, your device is not connected, it's saying. You need to connect your microphone or camera, or microphone at least, before I can add you. So maybe it's a message I can put. Okay. Message. So in the meantime, Aslam, I'll bring you on. Or Alan. I'll get Aslam. Oh, there's Aslam. Alan, I'll get you on after Aslam. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Is my voice audible?
Yes, I can
Thank
hear
you so much. All right. So it was really informative, today's stream. So, the last month in the Western countries, I mean, here in India, so we also work for an IT company of UK, as you must be aware, O2 Telecom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we work for an IT company, O2. So a lot of emails were coming in the UK. They celebrate this Pride Month. So a lot of emails also we were receiving about, because in India we are not so much familiar about, like, it's a kind of a festival over there. So a lot of emails coming. So,
yeah, festival now, huh?
Yeah,
that's what it's becoming, right? Pride Month festival.
Yeah,
lots of rainbows.
Yeah, but I don't like the term pride, because I feel it has a lot of negative connotation. I mean, like, whatever one can be, but pride, I mean, this is my individual thinking. Like, pride will not be a good thing to say I'm proud of. Even if saying I'm proud of being a Muslim also is not that healthy, I think. Saying I'm proud of this, I'm proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends where where you're coming from.
Yeah.
What place your heart is in when you say it. But yeah, there's nothing wrong. I mean, you can say you're proud of your children, proud of your achievements. It's not that big of an issue. It's just when you're talking about arrogance, really, it's the thing we're talking about. Arrogance, which is what needs to be avoided.
Correct. So I received a lot of these things. Then I was trying to develop, like, what Muslim society people like have an understanding about this thing. So in UK, this is my observation again, that in UK I feel like there are a lot of Islamic faith culturally more than the other people. So when I watch like YouTube videos, and also there was one Iranian, I think he is in UK. So he was having a video. If you check YouTube, his name is Sayyid Ammar. So he's from UK.
Yeah, I think I've heard of him.
Yeah, so I was watching his understanding. So he was putting across this argument that this story of that Lut, people always relate to them with this pride movement and other thing. So what he says that actually they were normal people, like normal, they were never had any issue with their sexual identity and other thing. But because some other people were they were having some what you call some famine or something, like starvation issues happened, or somebody did something in their society, so they started whoever coming, they started robbing those people in that in the highways, and then it took an extreme form, and then they do. So what your observation is about this, and then relating it with the modern day this sexual issues that's going on.
Yeah, no, I've heard that. There's a narration which is something like that, basically, that people were robbing or something like that, and then they said, okay, how can we stop these people from robbing us? And they said that, well, now from now on, any criminal we catch, we rape him. And now nobody will come and something like this. Okay, it's just a narration. In the end, who knows the truth of it, if it's true or not, but it doesn't really matter. In the end, the Quran just puts it simply that it's a fahisha. Okay, it's an indecency, and that's it. You don't need to historize it or anything. However it came to be, it's a fahisha. All right. I don't believe, of course, that it's genetic or that people are born that way or anything like that. Okay. You can't. If it was genetic, you'd be able to see a family tree of it, right? You'd have a family tree, just like when people, when people, long time ago, before genetics, people understood when some things were inherited, right? They would know that there are some things are inherited and some things which aren't, right? And nobody ever suspected that this is something which is inherited, okay? Because it's clearly not, right? If it was something which is genetic, could be inherited, then you'd be able to see it in family trees. So there's nothing much to say. It's just the world is a bit crazy right now when it comes to issues of gender and sexuality and things like this. The world is a bit bonkers, to be honest. There are people now that like to tend to be animals, right? That they say that it's their right to be an animal, and they go around. I saw a protest. I saw an actual protest of people who are protesting that they have the right to be dogs, and the way they were protesting was literally the whole time barking. So you had like and the police were there watching, right, trying to stay. I don't know how they couldn't laugh, but they're sitting there, standing watching these grown people dressed as dogs and protesting how they wasn't barking. Woof, 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 woof. Like dozens and dozens of people just barking. Okay, what can I say about this? I mean, we're getting too old for this world sometimes, I think. It's changed too much.
But what I feel is that, but for this, in order to, approach this problem in this modern day that we are facing, I feel that always telling, this is Luth, Prophet's Luth, and again, that will not be in today's time a very strong argument in order to, if we would like to present something. Again and again telling, it's Prophet Luth.
Yeah.
So I think,
it's not it's not. The Quran doesn't argue against this in this kind of way, right? It doesn't like talk about, hey, by the way, don't do this because the people of Lut did this, and this is what happens. It doesn't say. It's just narrating his story. Okay, the Quran just narrates the story of the people of Lut. That's it, right? And part of the thing about them is that they went into this fahisha. That was something which was known about them.
Because
there is no need to
because because let's say if you interact with any modern day person of that community, okay, he will say that why are you relating Prophets Luth who were committing some criminal offense and this thing, and where we are talking about genetic. So I mean,
like I said, I don't believe it's genetics. I mean, they can say it's genetics, and we can differ about that respectfully. But I'll say, look, I just don't believe it's something which is genetic. It's just that simple.
Correct. Actually, also I think that there are a lot of believing doctors, medical professionals, like in Muslims and Christian. I don't know why they are not presenting their arguments, whether it is genetic or not. Scientific community is not providing. I mean, we have like a lot of protesters, movement people are sharing their argument. Actual scientific community is not coming up. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean there is some, but of course it's everything now is it's crazy. These things are, people lose their jobs over it if they express their opinion of it.
Correct.
They'll be feathered and tarred. There's a lot of things. It's
Correct.
just the world is a bit bonkers in these kind of things now.
Yeah.
So
I observed one of your chats, like I don't know, a year back or 2 year back, you had some stream, and then there was some woman who was disputing with you in regards to abortion laws and all, and she was
mhm,
very harshly. She was not talking about scientific, and she was talking about individuals' right and all. I still
mhm.
remember she was discussing in the very harsh words she was using when we were discussing, like you were putting across the abortion related thing.
I don't remember what on this channel.
Yes, yes, you had a one stream dedicated to abortion, and then in the chat section, she was like more of that. Uh,
Yeah, there was some woman who got very
yeah,
um, you know very agitated. Okay,
yes, mm,
and I was giving, I would say one thing and she'd give me like a huge
mm,
paragraph. You can tell some people are just they're very how do I say, they're very jittery about certain things,
mm,
and they go over the top. So I think they're just I can understand that she's being very emotional about it. She was saying that she suffered abuse and stuff like this. So yeah,
mm,
I mean it is what it is. Yeah, the one which I did about abortion, that's right. Yes.
mm. So I think more what is happening in the Western studies is there's more emphasis is given on freedom than on education. I think like people like freedom related more and more is about education, educating ourselves, understanding. It's like off lately. What do you feel like?
Hmm. I mean, I don't have much to say about it, to be honest. There's
Yeah.
not much. There's not much to say about it.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think about these things as much, to be honest.
Mhm. Correct. But
Yeah.
today, in today's this thing is like in today's situation, it's becoming more and more challenges
Mhm.
in order to because and that's a struggle. A lot of news and all are also going. That people are struggling about these things in the Western countries, and a lot of disputes are going about this problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, I'm a bit out of one. I don't keep up with these kind of things, to be honest.
Yeah. But
I'm
I
not.
think your argument needs like the thing that you have stated like it cannot be proven genetically, so I think people should research more on that. I mean the believing community that how to
Yeah.
prove that it is not genetic.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it hasn't been thought of as genetic as much as it used to be. I don't hear that argument as much. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear that argument as much anymore. I hear now it's all about you can just choose to be what you want to be, right?
Yeah, correct, correct, correct.
So it's not even now that someone who's homosexual or queer or something that he was born that way. No, they say my choice, right? I can identify that way if I want. I can be that way if I want. That's what I hear
Mhm.
the most. So I mean, who knows where this will be settled, but certainly not by someone
uh,
like me.
sure, got it, got it. All
All
right,
right,
sure,
let me.
thanks a lot. Yeah, sure,
No
jazakallah.
problem. No problem. Let me try and bring on Adam, and then I have Alex. I'll bring you on afterwards. Okay.
Assalamu
Assalamu
alaikum,
alaikum.
Khalid. Alaikum salam. Can you hear
Walaikum
me?
assalam. Yeah, I can hear you. How you doing?
Yeah, perfect. Fine, thank you. You?
Good, good. Doing okay.
Yeah, fine, fine. Just I had a question coming back on the term of alima, someone who receives the word of God. Listening to your stream. By your logic, anyone in history could have received the word of God independently of their moral compass, whether they were a prophet or not. That's what I'm a bit,
Sorry, I wasn't clear on what you said in the beginning
sorry
on the
about the
term
term
what?
alima, someone that receives the word of God, independently.
Alima.
Yes, or what you said before the stream for that term. I might have missed something.
Say it again. Sorry, when
Alima
I said in
or
this
someone that
Alima.
receives the word of God, basically receives
You mean
word from.
somebody? Yeah, somebody, a prophet. You mean Nabi?
I mean, but anyone else? No, I remember you.
Anybody who receives basically
The
a
word of God. Yeah.
well, no, it's not the. I think you're talking about this section. Let me bring it back. The part about wahi. You mean
Oh yes, wahi.
someone who
Sorry,
receives
yes, my
wahi?
bad.
Yeah,
Yes, wahi.
revelation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah. So there's a Quranic word which is wahi, which is basically inspiration or that kind of thing. Okay, so it's not. Where is it? Put it. Yeah. So the idea of this being wahi. right? That when in this verse, when God said, "Oh, Dhul Qarnayn, either you punish them or else adopt among them a middle way," was that God actually speaking to Dhul Qarnayn? Did he hear this? Okay, in my view, no, that this is just rhetorical.
Right.
It's like a voiceover, right? It's like the voice of the narrator saying, "Oh, what will you do now?" Okay, but the person, of course, doesn't hear, right?
Yes.
It's that kind of thing. And then, of course, when it comes to the term wahi itself, so Allah talks about that He gives wahi to the bees, right?
Yes. Of course.
أوحى ربك إلى النحل, right? That God gives inspiration, wahi to the nahl, to the bees. They go and eat from here and do this, etc. Right? So they're receiving wahi in that kind of way, this kind of inspiration. Of course, there's another word in the Quran which is ilham, right? When God talks about وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Okay, that the nafs and he who proportioned it or made it and inspired in it gave it this ilham of its fujur and its taqwa, of its wickedness and taqwa. Right? There's that. But then, like we said, wahi, it's spanning from the wahi which is given to like bees and stuff. Then you have, for example, the wahi which was to the Hawariyin, okay, to the disciples of Jesus. Again, this is when God inspired to them that they should have faith in me and in my messenger. Again, I don't see this as something that they like consciously got, like you're saying, a word of God. They didn't get that as like word of God or inspiration directly, that they heard God's voice saying to them, "Believe in me and in my messenger." It wasn't.
So it's more
like that. I think this is more.
Yeah.
It's more like that. Okay, so it was like it was put into their hearts. They use like a whisper in their hearts. They should have faith in me and in my messenger. Okay, this kind of wahi. That's how I read it. Okay, I don't read it as a spoken. Then you have, of course, those whom God spoke to directly. Okay, and they had a back and forth from God, like Musa alayhi salam. Right, God spoke to him, and there was actual back and forth. And then there's wahi, which was revelation of the actual scripture or book or things like this. Like the Qur'an being put in the Prophet's heart, right, by the Ruh al-Amin, right,
Yes.
by Jibreel. So you have all of these things. Now, of course, they're all going to be in accordance with what you were saying, human nature, right?
Yes.
In terms of they're all going to be in accordance with the human nature of the person at the time, for whatever the wahi is. Then Allah isn't going to give wahi which is against that, which is against human nature and against the fitrah and against the
what
deen,
God intends, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because that term wahi actually reminds me of perhaps some other historical figures that aren't necessarily mentioned in the Quran. For example, perhaps this could be lies for all I know, but I could name Joan of Arc, for instance. Who according to folklore, received word from God that she should reconquer back the rest of France. So in my mind, that's supposed, for argument's sake, that it was true, right? How would this align with God's taqwa and God's true intentions for this world? To me at least, it doesn't make much sense to me in the way that God would want to interfere within otherworldly conflicts in that way. I'm just
So I think the other thing that goes back to what you were saying before is if somebody receives wahi on something, right, and let's say even if they believe like Joan of Arc or anybody else, right, they receive the wahi about something, even if it's, you say, explicit wahi about something, right? So the Hawarin, the disciples of Isa, they asked after they'd been given wahi to have iman in Allah and His Messenger, and then they said, "Amanna billah." They said, we do have faith and testify that we are of the believers, etc. Right? Yes. Later on, right, they asked Isa for this miracle, right? Give us this miracle of this table which is going to be sent from the heavens, right? And then Isa tells them, have taqwa. If you really believe us, have taqwa. Don't ask for something like this. Right, so this is people who had received a kind of wahi, yet they were still acting, in a way which is contrary to belief, contrary to iman, and they're still acting in a way which is contrary to iman. So it doesn't negate it, right? Somebody can receive, like right now we have wahi with us, right? We have the Quran. The Quran is wahi. That doesn't mean we act in accordance to it, right? Wahi doesn't impose somebody's following it, right? Somebody can receive wahi and discard it, right, and
Of
not
course.
pay attention to it or add to it, right?
Mhm.
And even the Quran mentions, yeah, it isn't for a prophet that God should give him nubuwah and wahi and hikmah and kitab, and then he would say to people, be servants to me other than God.
Of course.
عِبَادًا لِي مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ.
Mm.
No prophet should ever do that. It doesn't mean that no prophet could ever do that. They could.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
A prophet could potentially do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. The idea of wahi doesn't, it's not any kind of, it doesn't take away any of your free choice. Right. All it is knowledge.
It's
Right.
yeah, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. In
Yes.
the end, and that's what it comes down to is, an explicit type
But
of wahi. It's going to be knowledge. Yeah.
of course, yeah. But if we were given this wahi, as you say, and we had the free will to pick it or not, what would be what would be the point of having it revealed anyways? Since God knows the outcome in that way, or at least God is aware of the consequences applying them.
I'm not sure what you mean. What's the point of giving somebody wahi, and then
they don't follow
when
it,
God knows, and someone, well, it comes down to whether they follow it or not. Yeah, it's up to them, right?
No,
So God reveals a wahi to somebody, and then they could. I mean, the disciples could have said, no, we're not going to believe, right?
yes.
Allah gives them wahi, have faith in me and my messenger, and someone could have said no, right? It just means that there's probably a bigger burden on you because now you've been given something like this and you're rejecting it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I see. I see.
So it's probably like that. It will give you more, and then it comes down to that idea that it's all going to be a test in some way.
Definitely, but I mean, it's kind of fascinating in that way that revelations should come from anywhere towards anyone in this world, independently of their origins or presence. I mean, that goes back on the
that's the idea, right? Have the gates, have the doors of wahi closed, right? So I mean, I believe, of course, the Prophet Muhammad was the last messenger or prophet, but that doesn't mean that. But that doesn't mean that he's the last person to receive nubuwah.
Yeah, of course.
Does that mean that he is the last person to receive wahi? That nobody else receives wahi after him? We don't know that. I mean, less than prophets have received wahi.
No.
Right, like like we said, the disciples, the disciples, the Hawariyin, and who else? What else did I mention? Dasbat. Okay, these are lesson prophets, yet they received wahi.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, then. Thank you for your time, Khalid. Have a good day.
No problem. No problem. Anytime. And last, Alex. Hello, Alex. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam to
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Thanks. Yeah. What I don't have. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, first time I'm seeing you, I think, right?
No, actually, this is the first. This is my second time speaking with you.
Second time. Okay. Because
the
voice, you have a very distinctive voice, but I don't remember it. Or is that you've got a different microphone now?
No problem. There are many other distinctive voices. That's why. Yeah.
All right. Brilliant.
Second time, but I do listen to you most of the time. Just that.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have any topic. I just wanted to come in and see if I could say something because there has been this journey that I'm actually going through, and it's kind of lonely because I live in a country where it's an Islamic country. I've seen a lot of things. I've been a Muslim for 20 over years. I was a Christian before, and of course I was considered myself Sunni when I first proclaimed the Shahada, and things has definitely changed. I live in a country where it's a very fervent Sunni country, and because of that, I tend to rebel a lot.
Mm.
Yeah, with the people around me, and it's been quite a lonely journey, you know. But it's also quite liberating in some ways, because ever since I started following you, and I'm actually quite grateful, you know, to Allah, you know, for exposing me to other sources, because I have always had this. I mean, um, I always had this battle before, whenever I practice Islam in the Islamic community, and when I go to Friday prayers and I do my prayers and I read the hadiths,
Mm.
and and I struggle with that, because as much as I'm surrounded by people who would tell me what to do, because they still consider me as a revert, even though I've been a Muslim, you know, in life for more than 50 years.
Mm.
And yeah, and yeah, and I have been, I have been having this, I've been having this a lot of, how shall I say? I don't want to say that it's awakening, but a lot of insights ever since I was working in the Middle East, and I have been, when I look at Muslims around the world, I just find that this is not the Islam that I came to know when I was doing my research 20 years ago.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know, yes, and it's and what really pushes me to the edge, actually, when it comes to the Muslim community, is when people start to label others. You know, I have a family. I mean, my family are non-Muslim, and I used to be very gung ho, you know, trying to share with them about Islam, and I realized I didn't do it the right way, and you know, I didn't really, and because I didn't know then, but now I just feel that, you know, I mean, uh, I think the way I see it, I know they know God in their own ways. Like my mom, you know, I mean, she's a Taoist. I'm Chinese, by the way, and my mom's a Taoist. And in the past few years, I actually been seeing a change in her. Like, you know, she's, instead of going to the altar to pray to,
Mm.
you know, statues, she has been waking up early in the morning, you know, and sit by the window and meditate.
Mm.
And she does it again in the afternoon and in the evening, and she does it again at night. And you know, when I had witnessed all this, and I realized to myself, I said, who am I to say that she doesn't know God or she doesn't know Allah? Because obviously, that, you know, when she sits there and she meditates and she prays, she's obviously talking to Allah.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
no, that's definitely.
yeah. But when I tell this to my friends, they say no.
You say no. This is not
Then I
salah.
told them, I told them, well, that means, do you believe that she's actually has another God? Or do you believe that she's is a God for her and
Mm.
she's not talking to Allah? But anyway, it's actually quite difficult sometimes to get into people's mind.
Yeah.
But other than
Yeah. No,
that,
I understand. I understand exactly what you're saying.
sorry,
Yeah, I understand what you're
yeah,
saying exactly. Mm.
mm, yeah, and you know, I mean, there's a lot of, you know, your end game, your God's end game video was quite powerful. I think it's actually quite powerful, you know, thinking that, you know, I mean, the notion of us, you know, just living in this world and this life right now, you know, and
Mm.
try to behave well and develop ourselves just for a hereafter, that you enjoy for the rest of your life. I'm sure there's actually more than that. I mean, it gives you purpose. That that you are making a difference in your soul in this life.
Yeah.
For whatever whatever that's going to come.
Yeah, exactly. That will have a purpose later on.
Exactly. Our soul is not to, and because of that, I think, because I don't read Arabic, and I read the English translations, and I have been following a number of people, and then, sometimes, and the idea of heaven and hell seems so different to me right now. I mean, I came from a Christian background, and I came from a Buddhist background. So heaven and hell was this picture. But
Yeah.
when it comes to Islam, especially now, the heaven and hell it's totally different. There's something that I cannot grasp, but it's somehow it's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
There's that verse as well, even in the Quran, وَإِنَّ جَهَنَّمَ لَمُحِيطَةٌ بِالْكَافِرِينَ. That Jahannam is even now surrounding the kafirin. There are people who are like
yeah,
living in it now in many ways.
right. Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, sometimes, I mean, I just feel, when Quran was revealed, that, the purpose of the Quran and scriptures, it's because I think all of us, I mean, the Quran script has been inbuilt in us since creation, because we could understand it, even sometimes when we don't read it or we don't understand it, when we when we see things around us, when you go to another country, go to travel and understand other cultures,
Mm.
and then when
Yeah.
someone mentions something about in the Quran, and it just seems like this is what I saw, this is what I think it is, and then like that, and I see that's how the Quran speaks to you. Though I
Mm.
don't know Arabic, I try to
Mm.
find root words, but
Mm.
but still, even with root words, I mean, even with experts, the people with the best linguists in Arabic, could still have different versions of understanding the Quran or having different tafsirs in the Quran. So,
Yeah.
what does that say? Maybe, Quran is for us, by ourselves only, because this
Yeah.
is alive, speaking with you, speaking to you.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. You reminded me when you mentioned that your mother is a Taoist, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Taoist.
Taoism. Yeah.
Exactly.
I've mentioned him before, of course. Izitsu. You've heard me
Sure.
mention him before. You've heard me mention what's his name, Toshihiko Izitsu before,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He actually has a wonderful book called Sufism and Taoism, a
Yeah.
comparative
I
study of the key philosophical concepts.
actually downloaded that PDF.
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah. I have that. I have that book.
You have that book. Have you read it?
I haven't read it yet.
Ah, I
You
thought maybe
mentioned.
because that's something that maybe your mother would be interested in, because I've read like little bits of it, and it's very very insightful. I mean, like, I mean, I come from a Sufi background anyway, so that was very, I was very interested in seeing that myself.
Mm,
Hmm.
your brother Khalid, right?
Yes.
Khalid, I do have a question. I don't know whether I'm right, but I just want to ask you. But
Hmm.
when I see the Quran, when I read the Quran, yeah, a lot of it, yeah, that it's very abstract. It is because it's purposely abstract. Words are abstract so that we could make an effort to find out things in the best ways that we can.
Hmm.
It is never. It doesn't seem to be very it's explicit.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I mean, this is one of the things that you get to see this once it opens up in a way, you'll be able to see it in a really remarkable way. Where yes, it will seem that it seems some things are very, very abstract, right?
Yeah.
But then when you see the connection of it, especially the main thing, which is in how people view or believe or see things, right? Why is it that somebody will accept this or not accept this, or sees or can't see, or is, these kind of things, analyzing human behavior, right? You start to see it's like almost a perfect description, right? So even though, like, you're sitting there, you might be reading the verses, and just because you're just sitting there with the Quran just by yourself, just reading, okay, it's just like you said, almost abstract ideas, right? Abstract ideas. But then when you're actually out interacting with people, or just speaking to people, or trying to, like, especially when we're talking about these high concepts, or trying to see how people are navigating truths or rejecting truths, or going towards righteousness or going away from righteousness, and you see an example of somebody in front of you like that, right there in front of you, then if only you could have the Quran open at that very time, as you're watching people, you're reading, right?
Yeah.
So not just in your room, sitting there in your room with the Quran open in front of you, reading, right?
Yeah.
But if you're outside in the world interacting with people, and like the Quran is open in front of you and you're reading and you're seeing, it's almost like a perfect description of some people. It really is amazing how the Quran is sort of almost, it's like almost exactly what this person is being described in this verse, right? Whereas before, when you're just sitting there reading it in your room, it seems abstract. It just seems abstract, right? But then you see it in front of you, like literally, and it's like a perfect description of how this person is thinking, how he's behaving, why he won't do this, why he does this. It's absolutely remarkable in that kind of way, right?
I totally agree. Sometimes it gives you it just gives you the glimpse of the future if you decide to become like that, to become this type of human being, into this kind of character. I don't know if you understand what I mean, but what I'm saying is that
You're talking about how a person could be, right?
could be, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I understand that. What I was saying is, that sometimes you see it in front of you, like the person acting in a way where that exact way is being described in this verse, right? And you can see from this verse the real psychology of why this person is behaving the way they are. They don't even know why they're behaving that way, but the verse here is showing you why the person is like that, right? And it's a very I should try to find examples of that, but I see this all the time now. That I'm not sure where to show it. Like now, I mean, just a while ago, I was a couple of days ago, I think I was interacting with some. We were talking. Somebody brought up something on Twitter, right? Where we were talking about how people. It was about the tradition, how the Muslim tradition, like traditions never reevaluate themselves. Whether it's the Christian tradition, the Sunni, the Shia, whatever it is, they don't come together and decide to reevaluate themselves. Or something that Jonathan Brown tweeted about, and they made some exchange about it. And so we were talking about that, right? And I was just saying that, look, it should, the reason why people don't, like, the reason why you think to yourself, okay, why didn't the people around the Prophet, why didn't the people around the Prophet accept him, or why were messengers rejected? Why is this, right? And you realize in the end that it was never about the amount of proof. It was never about a lack of information. When prophets and messengers were showing signs to their people, the Prophet Quraysh in Mecca, he gave them more than enough signs, more than enough information, but that wasn't the issue. Okay, I used to wonder sometimes, why did people reject? Is it because they didn't see the information? It wasn't given to them. They didn't see the signs. It isn't. It's got nothing to do about that. It comes back down to the hearts, right? That no matter what, I'm just not going to follow you, right? So, like right in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, where it says, "Inna alladhina kafaru sawa'un alayhim anzartahum am lam tunzirhum la yu'minun." That is, الذين كفروا, it's the same to them, whether you, and it says you, anta, Muhammad, whether you warn them or you don't warn them, they will never believe. They will never have faith. Why? It's because it's not. It's because something in their hearts where I'm never going to accept it from you, Muhammad. Okay, it's not about the thing itself even, right? That's how they were, and so that's what it comes down to. Even when you have these religions or sects against each other, they will not accept something from the other. Right? When they have something which is they will just hold to their guns. I'm not going to accept it from you. I don't care. Right? It's not about the information. It's the hearts and how they react to somebody they're antagonistic towards. Maybe even if they're in the wrong. Right? So that's how it is. I mean, it's a bit. Maybe I haven't done a good job of explaining it there.
I understand.
Yeah, but that's, and so you see that. So, for example, like somebody you're trying to convince of a certain point, right? And sort of religiously, like saying, okay, look, you have to see that, for example, the people of Hadith, they weren't exactly completely. It's not this high level that you think of them. And you show example after example, you show what this person said, and they just make excuse. They always find a way, right? It doesn't matter how much what you show them, right? And when they get to a certain point, it's the same. Whether you warn them or don't warn them, they will not have faith. Okay, they've been sealed. Okay, they've sealed themselves. And then it doesn't matter. No Bible of the verse will change them. No verse of the Quran will change them. No hadith will change them. No intellect will change them. No new arguments will change them. Nothing will change them, right? They've reached this kind of state, right? So these are the sort of things I think that when you start to see, because the Quran is mostly about that. It's really all about guidance, right? It's about trying to help people to get to guidance and stay away from misguidance, and for those who are guided to be able to see the way of the mujrimeen. As the Quran says, وَلِتَسْتَبِينَ سَبِيلُ الْمُجْرِمِينَ, so that the way of the mujrimeen can be clear. So you can see and identify, before you the types of peoples, right? And be able to see very clearly around you, right? So in that kind of way, it becomes very very unabstracted when you start to see it in the world around you.
Sorry, Khalid, can you ever come to a point where you think that you have actually seen or understand things?
Well, yeah, I think you can definitely. Yeah, I think you can come to a point where you've definitely seen and understand things. But I think that you'll always be able to see the same thing that you've understood in another situation where it will apply just as well. Right. So I think there is a point where you can come and see, you basically have the grip of it. Right. I don't believe that this idea that some people have that, which is odd, right? The traditional Sunnis will talk about how the Quran is inexhaustible, right? But they never treat it as much, right? They'll talk about how miraculous it is, so many miracles, new miracles, scientific, that it's inexhaustible, that no matter how much you go to it, you always come out with something new. They praise it to the skies like this.
Yes.
But it's not enough for guidance. You ask them, is it enough for guidance without the hadith? No. Which is, it's crazy, okay? So, but no, I don't. I think the Quran there is a point where you can understand pretty much what it's there for, right? Because it was sent to be understood, okay? It was sent to be understood. It wasn't sent for every part of it to be unachievable, okay? But the problem is we have very little accumulated knowledge of this because, in our tradition, the Quran was abandoned. Right, so we're sitting here sort of like reworking things slowly ourselves. Right, we're trying to like piece together things. We don't have much precedent. We don't have 1,000 years of people doing real contemplation of the Quran and giving it its due, okay, to draw upon. Right, We don't have that. We're sort of like, even now, like we have to try to convince people what shirk means, the real meaning of shirk, what kufr is, the basic concepts, right? These have not been investigated fully in such a way where, it could have just been handed to us, and then we could have, seen it that it's actually true, as Quranically it's true. Okay, we're still trying to convince people that the Quran is not abrogated itself. That you don't have this verse abrogated another verse. Never mind that. We're trying to convince people that the Quran, the Sunnah doesn't abrogate the Quran, or that the Sunnah is not more powerful than the Quran, right? Or that it judges. I mean, our state is a real state, right? So we do what we can, but um, you can get it. But the thing about it, it is so much of it is accessible enough where you can look at it and say, yes, I've got it, right? But there's still going to be layers of depth there that how deep they go, I don't know, right? But I do think that it is ultimately accessible. Like all of the Quran is ultimately accessible, right?
Yeah, even if you're reading the translation, you still get the gist of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm a big proponent of saying that to people, that you don't need to know the intricacies of Arabic to get the guidance that you need from the Quran. The Quran was made to be easy, right? لقد يسرنا القرآن للذكر. We've made the Quran easy for dhikr, and it's in pretty much any translation you can get the guidance you need from it. Just be a bit smart about it, and don't try to get into too much of the details, right? Just don't get into too much of the intricacies, right? Trying to get exactly a pinpoint of something. No, stick to more of the general things, and then the general things, once you have them on lock, so to speak, they will slowly be, from those you'll be able to work downwards. Think of it like you're trying to draw a map of a whole city, right? What do you start with? You start with the big highways first. Get them right. Make sure you've got the highways in their place first. Then you can start putting the major centers, the major buildings. Then you start to add smaller roads, okay, and then smaller roads, and then because then they all fit in their place. They won't distort the image of the whole. Or even if you get them wrong, they won't distort the image of the whole city, right? If you've got the huge highways right, the shape of the city will remain intact, right? And then if you get the what's it called, the alleyways wrong, it's not going to be a big issue. Oops, looks like our friend has unfortunately cut out. Let's see if we can get him back. But anyway, that's what I would say, that you don't need. Yeah, there you are.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hear me? Yeah.
I can
Am I
hear you.
holding you up? I do have another question. If I'm holding you
No,
up,
I'm not holding you back. There's nobody else.
I see.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I would like to ask you this about this verse in the Quran that says that the world is actually a playground. Yeah, well, that's a translation. What does it actually mean? Because I don't take that as negatively. I don't take it as I look around the world, and then you look at your life, and then you see people, you see everyone, the way they contribute, and then the way they go on with their own lives. I think I just find it very childish, to say that the translation to say that the world is a playground.
Yeah.
It comes out of this, and it's just a waste of time.
Let
You're
me
putting too much effort in and all that. But what does it really mean?
let me
What do you think?
get it. Let me get it on screen. It's actually a very interesting.
Which verse I'm talking about, I suppose.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. There's a bunch of different ones, of course, but there's sort of I'll go for the one which is itself is a bigger explanation, which sort of like gives explanation for others. Because sometimes you have a verse in the Quran which mentions something, and the fuller sort of like a fuller version is in another version, right? So yes, that one which is about the let me just get it out. Right. It's in Surah Al-Hadid 20. 1 second. Oh yeah, I need to actually share the screen. Stop sharing this. Share this one. All right. Okay. So this is the main one which mentions it, and it actually it goes on. So the other one you could say are like, whenever you hear that the other verses which just talk about mention the first 2 points, it's like a summary of the rest. But anyway, here it goes. So know that the hayat al-dunya. Okay. So hayat al-dunya, it just basically means this lower life, lower world. Okay. It just means that al-hayat, the life of al-dunya, it says the life of the lower. Okay, what is it? Innama, it's only this is what it is. It's la'ibun, it's play. It's lahu, entertainment. It's zina, okay, it's adornments, right? Adornments, pageantry, making yourself look good. Okay. Then tafakhur, boasting among yourselves, between you. Takathur, increasing in wealth and children. And then it gives an example, like what? كَمَثْلِ غَيْثٍ أَعْجَبَ الْكُفَّارَ نَبَاتُهُ. Okay? It says, where is it? Just read the likeness of the vegetation after rain. Okay, whereupon the growth pleases the husbandman. Pleases basically the plant grows. Kuffar here actually means the farmers. Okay? Let me read international, it's a bit better. Yeah. The like example of rain, whose resulting plant growth pleases the tillers, which means basically the planters, the farmers. Then it dries up and you see it turn yellow. Then it becomes scattering debris, and in the hereafter it's severe punishment and forgiveness from your Lord. And truly the enjoyments, mal hayat dunya, truly the life of this world is just mata'ul ghurur, the enjoyment of sort of a delusion. Okay, what is this about? Well, the interesting thing here is this is basically the blueprint almost of our lives, right? You know how people, for example, atheists are saying, what's the point of life? What am I doing here? It's the same thing day in, day out. We're going, but look, it talks about from the beginning. The first step of life, what do kids do, little babies? What do you start doing? Play, right? They're playing. It's all about play. They're toddlers, 5, 6. That's all they do. 6, 7, up to around what age of 10? That's all they're doing. Play. Then what happens after the play? What takes fills the minds of kids after that? Entertainment. Okay, they're seeking out entertainments, right? Then it's all about movies, TV programs, entertainment, sports and these sort of things, right? Then kids get into that stage, right, where it's all just entertainment. Right, so play, then entertainment, and then what? Then comes zina, where everybody starts to adorn themselves. Kids wanting to wear the latest fashion, right? Girls, trying to make themselves look as beautiful as possible, right? Wearing designer clothes, getting, all of these things, the makeup, haircuts, all those, the kids that love their haircuts. Okay, now it's zina, adornments, right? Getting your bling, doing all of this, right? Then what? Then they're boasting. People start boasting, right? The next stage of life, people are just boasting about each other, to each other. Okay, it could be in grades, it could be in athleticism, it could be in whatever it is. In school, they boast who's got the higher marks, and thing, right? It's all about. It's now all becomes boasting. The enjoyment, the thing that people enjoy of this dunya, the lower things, and these are all like base things. Play, enjoy, entertainment, adornment, these surface level things. And now it's boasting, right? Well, when's that? That's when people are like, what, 18 years old, 19 years old, right? That's when they're always boasting. They want to boast about their their things. And what? And then after that comes what? They get jobs, and then it's what? Takathur fil amwal, trying to, outdo each other, gather as much wealth as possible. Then that becomes the goal of life, the purpose of life. People now start questioning: is this all life really is? Just gathering more and more money, getting as much money as I can, right? For the people who have money, who are making a lot of money, they start questioning it. The other people are too busy chasing. But others who have, they realize I'm getting all of this money, it's not really fulfilling me. It's all surface level, okay? And then what? Takathur and amwal, that doesn't do it. Then what? Kids, right? Having the better kids, and also tafakhurun bainahum, right? Like boasting among your kids, right? And then that's the last stage of life, right? So when the people get older, they've established themselves. Now it's all about their kids, okay? How well are their kids doing? They're in the best schools. My son got to this school. My son got to this university. My son is doing this. My daughter has got this, etc. Right? And so that's the like a blueprint for life, right? That's this. If you allow yourself to go, just constantly seeking these things, stage after stage, going from this to this to this, right? And then all you've done is followed the superficial things of life. And it's just the mata'al ghurur, right? All of these were delusional enjoyments for a little bit, and then they're gone, right? And then you move on to the next thing and the next stage, and they're all just very surface level, right? And that's what this next part gives it. It's كَمَثِلِ غَيْثٍ أَعْجَبَ الْكُفَّارَ نَبَاتُهُ, right? So it's like you plant something, you wait for it, you get it, it becomes, you love it, it's grown nicely, but then ultimately it becomes yellow, becomes stalk, it's trampled upon, right? And then it's blown to the winds, right? And you're not be able to keep anything. So what have you really gained? So when you're doing all of these things, going from play to entertainment to zina to fakhur, what do you have at the end of it? What do you actually have at the end of it? Right? You don't have much, because it's all surface level. Okay, you haven't improved your spirit in any way, your heart in any way, your actions. What are you leaving? Even if you're doing, it's better if you're like these scientists and people who leave legacies where they've actually benefited humanity in some way, right? They've actually done something where it's benefited humanity, and their legacies live on. They've actually achieved something which is going to last, like a sadaqah jariyah, as they say, right? A reoccurring charity to humanity, right? But the other things, if you take your life as just play, right, and just following the entertainment and these sort of things, you're going to be left from all of these efforts that you've put into life with very little. So that's one of the things where how I would look at that verse. This is the verse that you're mentioning, right?
Yes, this is the one. But what about what's real for those who contribute to the humanity? What's life to them? The enjoyment of the heart, the peacemaking in their own hearts.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, but there's also just, I mean, think of like a lot of, like you said, these scientists and people like this, they find great joy in, the intellectual pursuit itself, right? That they spend, your life work trying to solve a very important problem, and actually solving it and giving that to the world. There is huge enjoyment in that. People find a great solace in that. There's a lot of joy in the intellectual pursuits, right? So there's that. But then there's also a lot of joy in the philanthropy, right? And in charity work. So there are people that spend, they spend so much time volunteering, right? Like doctors and people who spend lots of time volunteering. They go on missions to, places in South America or in Africa, any place where there's people in need, and they'll give from their time, from their thing, right? And they find huge enjoyment in that. And that's not delusional enjoyment. That's really enjoyment, right? Because it's not just something that it's in your heart, real enjoyment deeply, but you actually bringing joy to other people as well, right? Yes. So you're bringing enjoyment to those around you for it as well. So there's lots of ways.
So that verse is basically addressed to those who feels, that they are the only things to do, that they are the only things in life that has
Yeah,
meaning.
it's about the superficial life, basically, right? The kind of superficial life. So that's
But
just
it's not.
it's just a game, right? It's
It's
not
not.
real. It's not real
It's not
life.
saying. It's not saying that this life is like that.
No, no, no. I
Only so
think
that.
what we need to distinguish. I mean, the Sufis do a very good job of this, right? They distinguish between the world and the dunya. Yeah. So the world, there's the world and there's the dunya, right? There are things which are of the world, but they are not of the dunya, right? Dunya means the lower parts of the world, like spiritually, the lower parts, the lower pursuits. The pursuits of wealth. And these things are like things of the dunya, right? So, for example, like there's one of the hadiths that they quote is, the Prophet said that al-dunya mal'una, the dunya is cursed. This lower world, meaning these things, right? These things here, it's cursed, and cursed is whatever is in it, except for the remembrance of God and whatever is connected to it. Anything connected to the remembrance of the divine, okay, that's not cursed. وعالم ومتعلم, a knowledgeable person and a person who is seeking knowledge. Okay, these are the things which are not. Everything else is like it's cursed of this world, right?
Yeah.
Of course, that's a general statement, because you have other things, of course, like we said, charities and these kind of things. But these are all things that you can, if you take the wide view of remembrance of God, that not just this conscious idea of God, of Allah, but God in the wider sense, right? The goodness and justice and all of these things as being part of that. Okay, then yes, that certainly is a true hadith when you put it in that kind of enveloping way. The remembrance of God and everything and anything connected to it. Anything connected to the remembrance of God. Justice is that, mercy, kindness to people. These are all connected to the remembrance of God. That's why when somebody does something, even if an atheist does something really generous or good to somebody who's in a real state, what does that person do? He praises God, right? The person,
Yep.
anybody who's in a really difficult place, and somebody helps them out of the blue, they feel immense gratitude to God, right? That's part of the remembrance of God. It's connected to that as well, right? Or when justice is done, thank God, people say, right?
When earlier you mentioned that, in the Quran, that when people recognizes Allah, does it mean that it recognizes Allah by His name, or recognizes Allah as the Almighty and the Creator?
It could be both. It could also be just be like the way that, for example, we say that animals recognize God, right? They have that innate, just um, um, like even somebody just having this sense, having a sense of karma, okay, or having a sense that there is goodness, ultimate goodness, right? That is also a recognition of God, I think, right?
Yeah.
And then the Quran doesn't say as much. I mentioned this, I think, not last time before, that the phrase, that الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ, those who have faith in God, right? It doesn't come up much in the Quran. It's usually left very open. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, just open. Okay, آمَنُوا in what? Have faith in what? It just says have faith, right? And of course, it means to have faith in God, but also it just means have faith in the goodness, that the goodness is good to do for its own sake. That's a faith in God as well, right? Or to have faith in justice, that ultimately justice will be done, right? This kind of karma, whether in this world or the next, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Gladiator, right? That line from Gladiator.
Is that
This world or the next, I shall have my. What was it? What did he say?
I don't remember, but
This
that was a
world.
good movie.
Yeah. And this world or the
Actually,
next, I shall have my vengeance or something like that. I don't know what it was.
yeah,
Yeah.
I see that, I see it in people, by recognizing certain qualities,
Yeah.
in life.
Yeah, like what you said about your mother, right? When she sits and meditates, right? That's a faith. That's a faith in God. Even just being able to sit, the way people sometimes talk about the universe, right? Like the new agey thing, right? The universe, or energy in the universe, or good vibrations. People talk about now, right?
I think that just because we're just filled with too many labels, that
Yeah,
things are, an understanding of, God is distorted. There's just too many labels around.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Mm,
I'd say so too.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
I'm out of questions, but I do have a lot of questions, but it's actually very late in my place, in my place here.
All right.
It's
Okay. No
actually quite
problem.
early in the morning.
No
Yeah.
problem. It's a wonderful talking to you,
It
and of
was
course,
wonderful talking to you. Yes.
welcome,
I would like to come
welcome.
on the
Yeah.
program again, inshallah.
Anytime, anytime. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Brilliant.
Okay. All right. Right. Walaikum,
Jazakallah.
brother.
Walaikum
Yeah.
assalam. Take
Yeah.
care of yourself
Okay.
and all the
You too.
best. Till next time.
Bye
Salam.
bye.
All right. I didn't get through to all of the questions. Let me very quickly. I'm going to start from the bottom now very quickly and see if there's anything. All right, so you guys were having a little conversation over here. Let's see if there's anything here. I'm still studying the Quran. Hello, Japanese people, they're so polite. Yes, I've met lots. I've been amazingly polite people. Is this who we have here? This, we have a Japanese viewer, it seems. Yes, one of my high recommendations is the Japanese scholar Izitsu. I've always recommended his books, they're really good. Let's see. Yeah, History of Atlantis. There's that guy. What's his name? Graham Hancock. Me and my daughters watched this on Netflix. His Lost Civilization series. Really, really fascinating. All stuff about lost. Like he says, we're a species of amnesia, and there was a before, and there was a people. There was an earlier civilization who were very advanced technologically, and they did a lot of things and passed some of that knowledge onto us, but then they were wiped out in some cataclysm or something. All right, if there's anybody have a question that I didn't get to, put it again at the bottom now, because I don't think I can go through all of these comments. And I'm trying to find if there's anything addressed to me. Here we have something about Alexandra. I think that Alexandra was not his real name, but rather a nickname because it means protector of the people, as Dhul Qarnayn was described in the Qur'an. Okay, that's something I did not know. Okay. Yeah, here, what to say, because I've still accepted things. All right. These are our flat earth proponents. I mean, I've mentioned. I mean, I've looked into the whole flat earth thing. I would just say that the Quran is not it's not clear for these kind of scientific pronouncements. Hi. Here we have a question from. I wish I could read that. I'm sorry, I can't. Are you familiar with Dr. Hani's interpretation of the Dhul Qarnayn story, which portrays him as the Prophet Muhammad? Yeah, no, I haven't actually listened to that, but I'm aware of Dr. Hani's different interpretations. We actually spoke about that in the last stream or the stream before last. It's very far-fetched, and what the thing which I've mentioned about Dr. Hani and his channel, what he does, he's all about the stories. So it's all about reinterpreting the stories. Okay, so he says Dhul Qarnayn is Muhammad, he says Ismail is Muhammad, he says, you know, different, he basically reinterprets a lot of the names to mean other figures that I'm not so sure. He also says that the earth means scripture and the heavens means, I don't know, things like this. The issue I have is that he doesn't, there's nothing that he brings forward which encourages people towards you know, birr, goodness, and taqwa, right? The whole point of the Quran, why was it revealed? It's to be guidance. There is nothing which I see in what he teaches or shows which is pushing people towards guidance or making the guidance more of the Quran more accessible. All he talks about is the stories, right? And let's say, for example, that Ismail is actually really the Prophet Muhammad. Okay, so what? What does that change? You know, what after that revelation, what are you trying to teach us, right? What are you trying to show us? There isn't much, right? So, and aside from the fact that a lot of things which he says, I think, are very far-fetched, and the danger I see in his stuff is that it takes away integrity from the Quran, because you know, people will go to him after they've become very disillusioned with Sunni Islam and Hadith-centric Islam. So when they go to him and try to, you know, get on board with what he's saying, maybe some of them will go on for a while with it. I don't know, maybe a lot, because I see, I mean, he gets a lot of views, which I find surprising. But anyway, eventually I think that there will come a point where the people listening, some of the people listening will think, you know what, I'm sorry, I've tried to accept this, but it doesn't make sense. And then what will happen is they will just see that, okay, that means the Quran itself is nonsensical, right? And all the while, I just don't see much of him actually promoting towards taqwa or birr or ihsan or anything like that. I don't see a focus on guidance. I see what I would consider a lot of just misinformation, right? Misinformation, which doesn't even push towards guidance or misguidance much, right? Even though, like, the most bizarre thing I've heard from him is that he considers Isa, Jesus, alayhi salam, to be a sinner, right? To be somebody who actually called people to worship himself, etc., etc. So he has some very bizarre things which I don't get, to be honest, and I don't really watch or listen to his stuff much. So maybe, you know, that's another part of it, but anyway, that's how I see it. Okay. All right, I'm just going to go down to the bottom now and see if there's any questions. Okay, so you're still with us. Well, you're welcome. If this is the first time here, the general overview for what I'm trying to show on this channel, you can find in a couple of there's a short video, which is a translation of Hassan al-Maliki, which is, I think it's titled Hadith of the Apostate, priority to Quran and Hadith. And then I have a video lecture, which is pretty long. It's called Quranic Islam versus Inherited Islam. And that gives a overview of what I'm generally trying to. I suppose it just gives the best overview of some of the ideas that I'm expressing here. Anyway, I think we'll stop it there. And Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this. A reminder that anybody can come on anytime during the stream. Next time, we do this every 2 weeks, and just give any insights that you have on the Quran or any verses of the Quran. Share your reflections. That's what really these streams are supposed to be for, to encourage people to think and ponder on the Quran for themselves as best they can. See more. Yeah, mostly went off past your head. Yeah, I mean, I would just sit and you said you're studying through the Quran, right? So yeah, just stick with it. Read it at your own time, at your own pace. Yeah, that's all I would say. But yes, I mean, a lot of what he has is just about the stories, which is difficult for me to accept how he sees them. He talks about the Abrahamic locution and things like that, which I just don't see. Anyway, again, thank you so much, everybody, and Jazakumullah khair, and see you again next time. Assalamu alaikum.